Hey everybody, I am at the Trial Gardens at Mass Young Plants, and they are doing something that's had me totally geeking out. They have some experiments running. So they have like 3 different containers, identical containers with identical plants. The only thing different is the number of plants that they put in each container. So that has me geeking out. They have another one where they're comparing pots with no fertilizer, with control release or time release fertilizer, and then regular liquid fertilizer. And the results are pretty eye-opening. So this is where it gets interesting because this container has 3 plants in it. This one here has 4 plants, and this one over here has 5. And when you actually look at them and you see them in person, the one with 4 plants actually is the best looking of the group. The one with 5 is almost smaller than the one with 3. So that just gives you an example of how the quantity that you have can be really influential in how good your containers are. I do notice, like with this one here, the Tea Magenta, the 3-pot one is a little bit smaller, but the other 2 almost identical. With the San Vitalia Toila Great Yellow, it's actually the one with 3 plants in it that's doing best of all. It actually is bigger than the other 2, which is incredible to think about. I can hardly tell the difference with this Nemesia. This one looks the same size as these 2. Lobularia, kind of the same story. We can't tell the difference. That's the case with the sweet potato vine. A little bit of a difference that I can notice in the verbena with the smallest one, but otherwise they're almost identical. Portulaca, same story. We're not seeing a big variation in the plants at this point in the year. So there's not a huge difference when we're looking at the lantana based on the quantity of plants. Same thing with the lobelia, almost exactly the same size with the 3 plants, 4 plants, 5 plants. In fact, this 3-plant one is probably a little bigger than the 5-plant one. Same thing with the salvias, not seeing a huge difference in those. Impatiens, I don't notice it with these varieties, but then when I look over here, I do notice that this one over here, which is the 3-pot one, and this is the Sun Patient Vigorous Peach Candy, this one does look a little different. So I think with impatiens, you're going to notice it, but with things like geraniums, no difference. Same thing with the coleus. The coleus all look almost identical. When we're looking at celosia, same story. And then down here, we have some of the helianthus. This is the sunflowers. These all pretty much catch up with each other no matter how many you put in that container. Angelonia looking very consistent across each one of these. Same thing with the calibrachoas, not noticing too much difference between the number of plants. Coleus, again, look at these varieties. This is the Downtown Santa Monica. Really great color and speckling on that one. Probably the area where the number of plants is most noticeable though is in the begonia. So this is 4 plants, this one is 5, and there is a distinct difference in the size. Same thing when I'm looking at this one here. This is the Adora Satin Rose. So we've got 3 plants in this one, 4 in this one, 5 in this one. I don't see a big difference between the 4 and the 5, but there's a huge difference between the 3. And then over here, the Viking Explorer, this is a wax begonia, 3, 4, 5. I'm gonna say the 5-plant one is the smallest. The nicest one is the 4, and then the 3 would follow close behind. Again, though, we're going to notice in this one, the Birthday Bash Cotton Candy Begonia. This is a new one for me. It's definitely a heavy double. This one has 3 plants. This one has 4. This one has 5. Otherwise, with like the Bidens, not noticing a really big difference in plant size. They definitely catch up. Now, it's important to note that it is August, so we're at the end of the season, so these plants have had time to catch up. If you need your pots to look good, say in 3 weeks or so, then that's a different story. Then you're going to want to put more plants in because it will get to size much faster if you have more plants in. And then if you have more time, then you don't need as many plants to have the same impact. But I think this is just showing, like, if your goal is to have good looking containers all through to the end of the season, the number of plants that you have, you can cut that back quite a bit, and you're going to actually have, in some cases, better blooms because you put fewer plants versus more. I think these fertilizer trials are going to kind of blow your mind because here we have the containers that have been getting constantly fed with liquid fertilizer. They look fantastic, but when we go over here, this is what they look like if they only got time release. Now, I'm not sure if they only did 1 dose of time release fertilizer or if they, have been continuously adding more, but you can see a significant difference And then these here have gotten no fertilizer, and these look even more sad. So it makes a big difference. So one thing I thought was interesting though is that the coleus holds up pretty well with very little fertilizer. However, when we move over to this one, you notice there is a bit of a change in it, a little bigger, a little nicer, but then the ones with fertilizer look fantastic. So you've got to keep that in mind. The other thing that was interesting though is that with more fertilizer, this Talverna Sienna kind of has this nice rusty color. With less fertilizer, it gets more red, which I thought was very interesting to see such a difference in the color. Let's see if there's other plants that we can kind of give as examples. So wow, look at the lantana. I mean, quite a difference. Lots of blooms on these varieties here, but then as soon as we come over here to the less fertilizer, there's some blooms in the continuous release category, but then when we get over here to the no fertilizer, I mean, these are looking like they're on their way out. The poor calibrachoas are just frying in there, and I think part of that just is they need that nutrition, and they need probably some iron as well, and you compare that to those over there. Wow. Now begonias, on the other hand, do hold up pretty well without fertilizer. These are the fertilized ones, really nice size on this, and this is the Adora Velvet Red. This is the time release, so you know, a little bit smaller, but lots of flowers still, so you can kind of get away with less fertilizer with the begonia, but there is a noticeable difference when we get to the zero fertilizer category. So I just find this absolutely fascinating to be looking at this side by side. This is the kind of stuff I geek out on. Let's take a look at this one here. This is the Birthday Bash Cream Puff Begonia. I hadn't heard of that one before. So that's with fertilizer, with time release. So we have a couple of those, and then no fertilizer at all. So if your plants are kind of looking like this, and you want them to be looking more like this, it's probably a fertilizer issue or some kind of nutritional issue. Well, thanks for watching, everybody. I hope that Mass Young does do kind of an overview of how those tests go so that we can see what they look like at week 3, 4, 5. I really want to know when those non-fertilizer ones and those time-release fertilizers started going downhill, because they probably did look good for a couple weeks, and then at a certain point, it just all fell apart for them, I'm assuming. So I'm very curious to know when that happened. And then also, like with the multi-pot ones, I want to know when each one of those different plants kind of caught up to each other, because I think that's very interesting. It also gives us an idea of how to time our plantings so that, hey, if we know we don't have it to look good until August, well, we don't need very many plants. But if we need it to look good like in 3 or 4 weeks, we got to load it full of plants. So just very interesting. I appreciate you guys watching and kind of geeking out with me a little bit, because this is the kind of stuff, these experiments are the kind of things that I love to play with, and seeing somebody else doing it and them doing all the work, hey, I'm all for it. So thank you guys for watching. I'll talk to you all very, very soon.